Hi, welcome back to Cybersecurity for Everyone. I'm Dr. Charles Harry. In our last episode, we talked about hacking as a process. And the very first phase of that process is reconnaissance. So, what is reconnaissance? Well, reconnaissance is frankly when the hackers are in the planning phase. And so, this primarily focuses around conducting research. And conducting research on an organization can mean several different things. It can include what technology is being used, but it can also include things like who actually works at the organization, the system administrators, as well as the admin assistants, as well as the corporate leadership. It even includes things like the suppliers and vendors of an organization. Who do they use to conduct their payroll? Who do they potentially use to service their heating and air conditioning? These are all potential attack vectors into the organization that hackers explore and are all part of the reconnaissance process. So, what are some examples of reconnaissance? Well, maybe identifying employees on social media, doing research on Facebook or Instagram, or better yet, LinkedIn. Maybe discovery of internet-facing computers and what services are potentially running on them. There are a variety of different freely available utilities that one can use to identify what computers are on the internet for a particular organization. What vendors does the organization actually use to manage, let's say, its physical systems, like its heating and air conditioning? They may have direct access into the target's network. Even details on the operating systems and the network structure of the target. These are all examples of reconnaissance. So what are some techniques? Well, in general, there are three major techniques. The first is technical. Technical techniques might include trying to answer questions like, what public devices can I see on the internet? What information can I glean about their domain name? Or what services are available on those internet-facing devices? Just from gathering basic information that we know exists on the internet allows us to get a better understanding of what the attack surface is and potential points of access just exploiting vulnerabilities in the technology. The second technique is social. Because remember, cyber is not simply about the technology. It's the interplay between technical and human systems. So understanding the attack surface, specifically as it relates to the humans in your organization, is just as important as the technology. I want to know who works in that organization. What roles do they play? Who's the system administrator versus the CEO versus the admin assistant? Can I understand maybe what drives them, what their motives are, what their hobbies are? Because if I understand those things, then I can generate different types of techniques to potentially exploit them and subsequently gain access to your network. I might even be able to find very practical information like what's their email address. That might be really quite useful if I want to send out a malicious email to all the employees in your organization. And if I know what motivates them and what their hobbies are, maybe I can entice them to actually click on it and allow them to install my malicious software. So there's a social element to the reconnaissance process. And third, there's an organizational component to this. I need to broadly understand what your organization does and what the organizational units are. Are you primarily broken up into 3 or 4 major pieces that are geographically dispersed? Do I have HR units which are distinct from other parts of the administration? Who handles your manufacturing? Who deals with the logistics? Because depending on what my end goals are, whether it's to steal customer information or to steal your intellectual property, or to create a major disruption, I need to understand what parts of your organization do what. That is all part of the reconnaissance process. It might also include things like, who are your corporate leaders? My guess is that your chief executive officer or your chief operating officer would have a lot of information about the strategic direction of the company. If I'm engaging in corporate espionage, I might want to target them specifically. So what units handle customer data? If I'm a criminal organization and I'm primarily motivated, through a financial motive, how do I actually know where to go? Well, if I understand a little bit more about your organization and who handles customer complaints or deals with questions for your product, well, guess what? Maybe I want to target the systems they use because they probably hold a lot of customer data that I can acquire and eventually sell on the dark web and make some sort of profit. So, what are some of the results from all this reconnaissance that I'm conducting? Well, they might include things like the listing of all your internet-facing devices for the targeted organization, their location on the internet, so their IP addresses, the services that are running on them, and the known vulnerabilities those services have. It might also include lists of people who I could potentially use as part of a targeting list, employees, their email, the positions that they serve, and the social media accounts that they have. Those are all things that I can use as a threat actor to potentially gain access to your network. So what are some of the takeaways? Well, so again, hacking is a process. It's not any single activity. It is a process which includes lots of different activities in different groups. The first phase of that process is reconnaissance. And reconnaissance includes both technical and non-technical activities. They're all part of this broader planning stage. The results of this reconnaissance could include things like a list of devices, their vulnerabilities, or it could include things like a list of people and a way of actually connecting to them through their email or their social media handle. So reconnaissance is the first phase of the hacking process. In our next episode, we'll talk about the second phase, weaponization. I hope to see you next time.